Empress of Britain. Gross weight, 42,300 tons. Capacity, 1,153 passengers. Destroyed by enemy action, October 28, 1940. The Battle of the Atlantic had begun, and few were as lucky as C.D. Howe, who survived the torpedoing. One Canadian city was a pivot of the whole Allied cause. In official communiques, it was always designated simply an Eastern Canadian port. Halifax, Nova Scotia. Food, oil, and munitions must flow from here to Britain, or the war is lost. To escort this precious cargo, the Canadian Navy conditions a great stream of volunteers. In those early days, only a handful in each Corvette had made the trip before.
There were ways of aging your uniform, just so everybody knew you were an old salt. Soon the new kids would be bleaching their collars, bending their caps, and generally making like old matlows. The real salts were the merchant seamen. They didn't need uniforms. Somehow you just knew. Everybody was told to keep his mouth shut. Merchant seamen didn't talk much anyway, but they did a lot of listening.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm very glad to meet nearly all the captains sailing in convoy with me. I hope that you will realize that the signals I make are not made for my own pleasure or for fun, or just because I have nothing better to do. Every signal I make, either to an individual ship or generally to the convoy, is an effort to ensure the safety of the convoy. And I just once more ask your cooperation.
It was a long way to Derry. A convoy moved only as fast as its slowest ship, and that was usually about 6 knots. When you thought of the wavy Navy, you thought of the Corvette. Somebody called it the child of urgency. It was built like a whaler, and it was small and cheap and seaworthy, and it could get around. On the lower deck, the uniform went into storage, and so did a lot of the pusser Navy traditions. But the little tub was awfully crowded, and there wasn't any room for dirt. Just out of Bedford Basin, they made sure everything was working pretty good. The depth charge was a can of TNT, and it was our best defense against a Jerry U-boat. But there were times you didn't have to worry about U-boats. You didn't even give much of a damn for girls. The first real blow broke most of the crockery, but not many guys cared if they ever ate again anyway. Somebody said a Corvette would roll on wet grass, and I believe it. When she'd settled a bit, you'd get back to the routine. That meant working, but it also meant the daily tot of rum. They called this up spirits, and it helped. You were safe from the Jerrys in a fog bank because they couldn't see either. But there was no elbow room in a convoy, and you could ram another guy. cut speed and crawled. We didn't like fog. We moved so slow, and this trip was plenty long enough. Besides, it was creepy. Got on your nerves. The Corvettes were sort of the cowboys of the convoys. You went back and forth through the lanes, keeping everybody in line and picking up stragglers. When you came off watch, you'd drink this thick cocoa they called kai. Very rich stuff. You needed a lead belly. But if you kept it down, you felt human again. And finally, you were out of the fog. The mess deck of a Corvette was no place for a guy who couldn't stand crowds. It was also no place for a guy who liked food. The common dish was stewed tomatoes and undercooked bacon. For reasons of its flavor and appearance, it was generally known as red lead and bacon. Some evenings, everything was nice and peaceful, and the sunset was real pretty. The Jerrys loved those evenings. The old Aztec wasn't the most accurate detection device, and when you got a contact, it could be an old wreck, or a school of fish, or a sub. When you hit the sack, you didn't figure to stay too long. Most times, action stations was a false alarm, but they didn't take chances. We stood by and made as much smoke as we could. The contact faded, but we stayed on alert. The Jerrys had weathermen too, and they knew when the night was clear and the moon was full. At least we kept busy and had something to do. And we knew that they probably wouldn't be shooting at us anyway. The freighters were the targets, and all the merchant seamen could do was sit and hope. And some of them were sitting on a hold full of oil or munitions. They were older guys than us, and they'd been there and back. Their pay was a little higher, but I never heard anybody gripe about that. I guess they were about as brave as you could get.